Hey! So, on the first half of 2026, I actually didn't read that much horror, which is a little surprising given that in 2025 and before, most of my books were horror, but I think I've just diversified my reading taste over the course of like the last 2 years so much that suddenly I just don't gravitate towards it that much anymore. But I still want to pick up more horror again. And that's why today I want to look at the Horror Bingo Reading Challenge for 2025 and 2026, which was created by this YouTube channel called Wicked Reading. I'm going to link her in the description because I think the videos are very cool and I really like this bingo. And I mean, technically, I think this is supposed to run from a point in 2025 until the same point in 2026. But I just like this concept and I want to use this as a jumping off point for reading more horror in the latter half of 2026 because I just want to get to more of that genre again. And yeah, so today we are gonna look how many of the horror books that are currently on my physical TBR would fit into this bingo. And yeah, I hope that you will enjoy this video, and why don't we get into it? So the first two categories I actually sadly have no books for. Just so you know, the first two categories are published in 2025, which I interpreted as published in 2026 because I am doing this in 2026. And while I have already read a book that was published in 2026 in the horror genre, which was Scratch Moss by David Barnett, I sadly at the moment don't have any other releases for the genre of horror that came out in 2026 on my physical DBR, so I don't have anything for that. And when it comes to mixed media, I sadly also don't know if any of the books on my TBR currently have mixed media. I am notorious for not really looking at a synopsis once I bought it. It goes on my wish list once it intrigues me, and then I just kind of forget about it and hope it's good. So I sadly don't know if any of these have mixed media. So yeah, for the two first categories, I sadly have no answer. The next category I actually have something for, and that's indie slash self-published. For this category, I looked on my shelves and sadly really only found one book. I do have a lot of indie published books, but for some reason I had only one horror indie published book, and that's In the Devil's Dreams by Felix Blackwell. I have actually already started this book once, and it's currently a soft DNF. But for all I know, this book is about this man who visits his mother in this cabin that is, I think, on a cliffside next to the sea. And then there's this weird ghoul that comes and maybe kills his mother, maybe not. This book is very weird, very dreamlike. I think it says dream logic on the back, which it's not something I like, but I still have hope for this book. But again, I already saw the note, so like no. And then he runs out into this forest, and there's like all this weird chasing going on. And so yeah, this is a very weird book, but it does technically fit into the self/indie published category, so maybe I'm gonna pick it up again for this one. The next category is paranormal, and I've actually really had a lot of books that fit into this category, but I just kind of didn't really know what exactly that was meant here. I just like interpreted it to be like everything that's kind of supernatural. So in my opinion, the books on my TBR that fit in here are The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White, which is about this boy living in an alternate Victorian society where I think basically some people are born with these purple eyes, and those people have the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead in the spirit realm. And now that has become a sought after profession and is like controlled by this weird cult or order that is like royal and everything. And our main character is trans, so I really like the representation. It's currently exhausting enough because I was in a reading slump, but I am very interested to pick it up again. Next for the category, I have an entire H.P. Lovecraft collection with all his accumulated stories, and I think there are definitely some paranormal ones in there, if not like all of them, so I think those fit. And then In the Devil's Dreams, I would guess also counts for the paranormal category again. Like maybe it's all has a logical explanation, but at the moment there is so much weird shit going on that I can only explain myself with paranormality, so I would also say that fits in there. Then there's The Whistling by Rebecca Netley, which I think is this gothic horror about this woman who I think gets hired as this caretaker for this child, and she arrives like at this old decrepit manor, and I maybe think that there's like a ghost that is whistling, just judging from the title. And yeah, I hope that one is good too. And lastly, for the paranormal category, I found Ghost Written by Ronald Malfi on my TBR. I've enjoyed Ronald Malfi books before, but for some reason I just don't gravitate to this one, even though I own it. But this one is basically a collection of short novellas, all revolving around haunted books. And for some reason, I kind of find myself not really gravitating to haunting stories anymore. But I really like Ronald Malfi, so maybe this is gonna be for me. Anyway, it fits into the category, so maybe I'm gonna pick it up for this one. The next category is stolen from another TBR, which I have nothing for because I don't really compare my TBRs to a lot of other people and did not do it for this one. But maybe I have to actively watch other people's TBRs in BookTube, or maybe some from my mom, what she is going to read, and maybe some horror books I would like are on there, and then I can put it in this category. The next category is vampires. And I am surprised that I only found one book with vampires on my physical TBR, but I do own Dracula, and I want to read it at some point. Obviously, Dracula is about Jonathan Harker, who gets summoned to discount Dracula's estate. And I think we all know the story of Dracula, how he basically gets trapped there and he's communicating. It's all like in epistolary format, I think. And yeah, it's a classic in the horror genre, and I think a classic in general. And I do want to read it. I have been a little intimidated by it, I think, but maybe I'll pick it up for this challenge. The next category is water setting. And I have actually already read this year like 3 books that were with a water setting. I think Sakolina, The Fisherman, as well as The Har all had very water adjacent settings. So I was surprised that when I looked at my TBR, I only found one other horror book that had a water setting. But that horror book is The Trench by Steve Alton. You could probably argue this is more a thriller novel, but I still included this in here because it's a giant scary shark. This is obviously the sequel to Meg, also by Steve Alton, and it continues the giant shark antics from the first book, probably with the new baby shark that was born at the last one. I'm sorry if I spoiled that for you, but I don't think many people are that invested in the Mag series by Steve Alton, and it's also, I think these books are funny, even though you would be spoiled. So I don't know. Maybe I'll pick it up for this one. The next category is sadly another blank, and that's horror movie elements. I wasn't sure how to interpret this, but I would probably think that it includes elements of a horror movie. Like, yeah, the title. So basically it's about a horror movie, basically. So probably books like Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, Burn the Negative by Josh Winning, and there's a few books I've seen this done. I think Craig DeLuey has one that is called like How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive. And sadly, those books just kind of don't appeal to me. I do love horror movies, but I am just really not gravitating towards a book being written about the making of a horror movie and the probably vicious antics that go on there, given that it's a horror book about a horror movie. And yeah, I don't know. Also, these are a lot of like slashers, I think, and slashers in book form just really kind of don't appeal to me. So yeah, but if you know about a horror movie book that you would really recommend, then please put it down in the comments, and maybe I will consider it. The next category is called Spells Ghost or Scare. So that probably means that it's ghost or scare in the title. And I did search my Goodreads and found Ghost Written by Ronald Malfi. Again, we already talked about it for a few other categories, but maybe if it's for so many categories, I probably won't count them consecutively. But when I found it, then maybe I will pick it for this one. And then sadly, I have another 3 categories with blanks in them. And those are Liminal Spaces, a library book, and Picked by Chance. Firstly, let's start with Liminal Spaces. I sadly have no horror book on my TBR with Liminal Spaces. I know that there is a new emerging trend given that the Backrooms movie was so successful, and I think Exit 8 got a novelization, so I am interested in that. Maybe I'll check it out. If you know any liminal space horror books that you would really recommend, like, again, I would really love to take recommendations here. But yeah, I know that there's like many lists emerging now, especially since the Backrooms are so popular. But I have personally like never really gravitated to liminal spaces. They're creepy, don't get me wrong, but it's not just something I really sought out in horror so far. So yeah, I don't have any books actively on my TBR. As for the other 2, I don't really have a library near me. There is one, but they don't stock horror books, so I could not really pick something from there. And yeah, that would probably be a problem, so that one is probably gonna be a little difficult. As for picked by chance, that is obviously like an easy category to complete, but I would just have to pick a book by chance, which I obviously have not done at this point, but I think that's not really difficult to do. So that's definitely one I'm gonna complete. I just can't really put a specific book from a TBR here because again, it's chance. Next category is a book you have been putting off. And so I really put some of the chunkier horror books on my TBR in this category because I definitely have been putting those off, which would be The Ceremonies by T.E.D. Klein. My mom got this for me like 3 years ago, and I enjoyed the opening, and then just it dragged so hard that I stopped after, then got on to other stuff, and I started to read it again last year, and it just really didn't click with me, but I am so intrigued by it, so I still really want to give it a shot. And yeah, I've definitely been putting that one off. If you don't know what it's about, it's basically, I think, this cosmic horror novel about this guy who goes to this Amish community to, I think, rent out a place where he can write a paper, I think, or maybe write a novel. I'm sure he's writing something, I'm just not sure what exactly, and there's some very weird antics going on there. It's just very long and very draggy, so I've sadly been putting it off. The other two books are Pet Cemetery. I also softly enough that one, and I know it's one of Stephen King's most beloved works. Stephen King just generally doesn't really click for me, even though I keep picking up his works because I just want to read more of him, and also the used copies are very cheap, so they're staring at me. And yeah, I still want to do that one. I just scared that I won't like it as much as everyone else, which is the case with every Stephen King kind of for me. So yeah, if you didn't know what Pet Cemetery is about, it's obviously about this family who moves in this house, and this house is next to these woods, and in these woods there is a abandoned Native American graveyard thing where when you bury things, they might just come back to life, but in a scary, twisted version of themselves. So, yeah. I think everybody knows that story. I just am a little scared of picking it up. And lastly, for the books I've been putting off, this is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. Blackwater, if I just had the individual volumes, would not be a intimidating series at all. But given that I have the huge bind up in the complete saga edition, this book is over 700 pages and has very tiny font. And while I am very interested and got a little over halfway through the first book, I am just sadly very intimidated by it. So yeah, that's definitely also one I've been putting off. If you don't know what this one is about, I will just give you a synopsis that of the first book, that basically there is a flood coming through the southern town, and maybe something came with that flood. That something may have the appearance of a beautiful young woman, and that beautiful young woman might just charm the heir of the biggest family in town, but though that woman has secrets because she came with the flood. And yeah, that's just a whole saga about this family, its family intrigue, but also obviously the intrigue around the secrets of this woman. And I am very intrigued by it. How often did I say the word intrigue just now? I don't care. But yeah, it's intimidating and I've been putting it off, but maybe I will read it for this challenge. Then for the next category, we have LGBTQ plus rep. And I am scared to say that I only found 2 books here, which is scary because I love LGBTQ plus rep in all books. But it seems like I've just not been picking up enough horror books with them in it. I have a huge assortment of gay romance and other LGBTQ romance on my shelves, but apparently I have been really slacking on the queer horror. So I would really appreciate it if you could give me some recommendations here. I am kind of ashamed of myself because I love to read queer stuff, and so that just kind of seems wrong to me, but I seem to have not prioritized that for some reason. The 2 books I have, though, are both from Andrew Joseph White. We already talked about The Spirit Bears Its Teeth, and the other one I have is Hell Followed With Us, which I don't really know the synopsis anymore. I probably just put it on my list because I thought that Andrew Joseph White in general sounded cool. And yeah, so that's the ones I have, and I definitely want more. Again, I'm ashamed that I only have so little. For the next category, we sadly have a blank again, and that's a buddy read, because I don't really have a person that I could buddy read something with. But if you have any suggestions for any horror books that are a good buddy read, then maybe drop them down below, and maybe I could convince my mom or maybe Sunny to read them with me. A low chance, but worth trying. The next category says a book that was recommended to you. Actually, it just says recommended, but I interpreted it as something that was recommended to you. And that's actually kind of like most books. I really rarely organically discover a book through like Goodreads or Instagram or something, because mostly I just engage with book content on YouTube. So I hear a lot of people talk about books. And so most of them were in some capacity recommended to me by a booktuber. But the ones I specifically still remember getting recommendations for are actually like most Stephen King books, because I see just a lot of people always talk about them. Then there's obviously Dracula, which I've also seen a lot of people talk about, not even just on the horror side, but also just classic literature in general. In the same vein, I also heard a lot of recommendations for Frankenstein. I haven't probably explained the plot for Frankenstein, but also probably everybody knows, but if you don't, Frankenstein is obviously about this doctor who wants to create a life form, a sentient life form, but from like scrap parts of other human beings. And then he manages to do that, and out comes Frankenstein's monster. And it's a story about what it means to be human, I think. Again, I haven't read it, but I really want to, because it is a classic, and a classic horror book at that. The other book I've definitely seen recommended is Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. This one was probably pitched to me as another version of It by Stephen King, kind of. And I don't really know more than that, but but it's probably a like coming of age story, and it's set in summer, like the title implies, following a group of kids. And that is an appealing premise. I mean, It by Stephen King is also an appealing premise to me. That book's just lacked in execution, so maybe this would be good for me. And so I also put that on my TBR, and it is currently there, and I still know that it was recommended. And the other one I've also heard recommendations for is Blackwater. I have heard people talk about that series in very high regards, and that's why I picked it up. And it's now languishing on my TBR shelves, but again, that's why this challenge is here and should help me get to my horror books. So yeah. Probably the strangest category to ever blank is novella, because I love reading novellas. A lot of the books I read are pretty short, and for me, a book is just amazing when it is like a book between like 100 and 250 pages. I love these because I can consume a lot of them, but if it still manages to really emotionally affect me, or like teach me something, or just like get its message across in that low of a page count, I just think that's really a great accomplishment. But I was shocked to see that I don't have any short novellas on my TBR right now. It's at least not in the horror genre. And I think maybe a cause of that is that novellas always have a very short stay on my TBR. So I don't think these really get to be that long on my TBR shelf. And maybe I've just already read the ones I've hauled this year, or just didn't haul as many of them this year, but for some reason they are not on there. So yeah, if you have horror novella recommendations, I guess drop them down below. There are probably lots of them on my wish list. I just don't seem to have any on my physical TBR at the moment. And the next one is another blank. This is planty slash ecological slash nature horror. Yeah, this one is not a category I've really ever gravitated towards. I know that I am in possession of Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin, but I DNF'd that book pretty quickly because I just didn't really gel with the writing style or the premise. It was a book that was gifted to me, and I thought I'd give it a shot, but after reading like the first 2 chapters, I was like, oh, this really doesn't seem like it's for me, so I kind of gave up on it. But if you have any other recommendations for eco slash planty slash nature horror, then I would really love if you could tell me about them. Then we have a category that is called Title Includes a Verb, where I finally found some picks again. On my physical TBR for the category are If It Bleeds by Stephen King, which is a short story collection, and I think one short story is a continuation of The Outsider, which makes me intrigued because I like The Outsider. And seemingly the other book that is on there is The Spirit Bears Its Teeth, which we already talked about a bunch of times, so I won't do it again. Next category is another blank, and that is Second Chance. I mean, I technically could probably use a lot of the books I soft DNF'd here, but for some reason those don't really count to me. Second Chance would for me really be something that I've already written off. I've already put it on my red shelf to be on hold later in the year when I do my book on haul. And that has happened this year with The Terror by Dan Simmons, but the second chance was another DNF. So I don't really feel qualified to do that right now. For the next prompt, we have animal on the cover, which I thought I would definitely have more of, but I found at least a few. The first one is The Trench by Steve Alton. My cover has a shark on the cover. Then we also have Dracula, because my edition includes bats on the cover, as well as Skeleton Crew by Stephen King, because for some reason my edition has a tiger on it. I have not read that book yet, so I don't know if a tiger plays a role, but I thought it was kind of a strange visual. Skeleton Crew is another Stephen King short story, probably most famous for including The Mist, which I have read as a standalone book, but will then probably reread once I get to this book. And yeah, I'm very excited about that because I really like The Mist, and it makes me hopeful for the quality of the rest of the collection. And the last book I found with an animal on the cover is Hare House by Sally Hinchcliffe, which I think is a gothic horror story, but I don't really know any more about it. Only that I was very excited when I hauled it, and now I've seemingly forgotten about it. But maybe that's why this challenge is here, so it reminded me that it exists, and that's good, I think. Then we have a one-word title, and I think I've definitely probably skipped over a few, but I found at least a few. The first one is Firestarter by Stephen King, which is about this girl with fire powers. It's all probably connected through Stephen King's like Shining and people having supernatural powers things. And this girl is hunted down by a government agency, I think, and a man has to protect her. Then I also found Revival by Stephen King, which I am very excited about because for some reason I am very excited about the premise, even though I don't remember the premise. But I remember being excited about the premise, so I am now excited for it for some reason. Yeah, maybe it's really time to read this just to get my curiosity off the hook. Then obviously Dracula is also a one-word title, same as Frankenstein is. Another one where a Stephen King book with a one-word title is Cell. I think this is about probably people being turned to zombies by calls on their phone. This one is another one I've heard horrible things about, people saying that it is very outdated, and I think Stephen King in general can be very outdated, so if the general public admits that, then it probably is extremely harsh, but it's on my TBR. And the last one I found was Ghostwritten, again, by Ronald Malfi. We already talked about it. Then we have a debut book as a category. And here I've definitely could have skipped over a few because I just don't know if it was the debut book by the author. But the two that I'm kind of sure of, again, tell me if I made a mistake here, are Hell Followed With Us, which I think was the debut novel by Andrew Joseph White, as well as The Whistling, which I think was the debut novel by Rebecca Natalie. We talked about both those books already, so I won't mention them any further. Then I sadly found another blank because I don't really get the prompt, and that's works with another goal. If I had to interpret it, it's probably a book that has the goal of informing me about something, teaching me about something, anything. And I don't really know of any horror books that want to do that are my TBR. Maybe there are, but maybe I would have to read them first to really know about it. But also, I think my interpretation of this is really similar to the next category. So if I got it wrong and anybody knows about it, then tell me. But with that, why don't we get just like in the next category, and that's social commentary. And here I also really kind of don't know because a lot of books have social commentary, but often I only see that once I really get into the book, so I can't really comment on that here. But the books I have thought have probably social commentary in them that I already know from them being on my TBR are The Green Mile. I think this one is probably about the prison industrial complex as well as racism, even though I have recently heard perspectives that this book and Stephen King's portrayal of especially like I think black inmates in prison is racist in and of itself, so maybe it's not the best portrayal, but I think it has some social commentary, so I thought maybe of this one. And then obviously we have social commentary with Hell Followed With Us as well as The Spirit Bears Its Teeth. I put these on here because obviously they're written by a trans author about trans people, and that will kind of always have social commentary coming with it because existence of queer people and especially trans people shouldn't be political, but for some reason is. And I know also that The Spirit Bears Its Teeth is political from what I've read from it. Like, it comments on the oppression that this trans boy faces in that society. And so I just also extrapolated that thought onto Hellfall with us, and that it probably has the same themes and messages. So I definitely know about those two. And so yeah, we went through the entire horror bingo. I've definitely noticed that this all turned around a few selected books. So I definitely think I need to buy a few more. No, that sounds bad because I already have so many books, but maybe I'll just have to read the ones that fill out the categories already, and then we can talk about ones that fill out more categories, I think. Yeah, that's probably a better goal than just buying more books to fill out more categories, even though I haven't even read the other ones yet. That really sounds reasonable when I think about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you have any recommendations for any of these categories, even the ones I already have books for, because I also don't really want to like double up the categories, because I definitely would want to read one book per individual category. I don't know if that's feasible. I don't know if this challenge at all is feasible. This is just like me putting myself out there and hoping that through that I can hold myself accountable to really like do this challenge actually. And yeah, tell me definitely if you participated like in this challenge like actively, and not just like me when you kind of put it towards your own purpose. And also yeah, any other thoughts you might have, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye!